Hey everybody, it is 1 p.m. on the East Coast. We are really excited to have you here for our webinar today in conjunction with LinkedIn Board Recruitment, from building a board matrix to posting your opening on LinkedIn for free. My name is Andy Davis, and I am here with my colleague, Jennifer Holland. I'm the Director of Training here at BoardSource, and Jennifer is the Director of Consulting. We're super excited to be with you guys today to talk about this topic and really help you learn how to look for the resources and the right people strategically to see what roles you need to fill on your board, what gaps you need to fill, and how to do that effectively. So we're going to talk about that over the next 45 minutes or so. But before we get started, I'd also like to introduce Allison Dorsey. She is the Social Impact Manager at LinkedIn. Allison, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, I do want to just kind of go over a couple of rules for the road here. If you can see on your right-hand side of the screen, you can see a chat and a Q&A box over there. If you have questions, and we certainly hope you do, just enter them into one of those two boxes. I'll be monitoring both, and we'll take questions from there. Any comments, questions, concerns you have, that sort of thing. If you can't hear us for a second, that's kind of normal. If you're listening through a broadband connection, usually wait about 15 or 30 seconds. That will come back. But if for some reason you can't hear us after just a little bit of time, let us know because there might be a larger issue. So just type in there, hey, Andy, got some audio issues. It's always better if you call in using your landline. You can always hear just a little bit better. If you go to the top left-hand corner under Quick Start, you should be able to see a call-in feature. Click that button, and it'll give you the number to call. If not, let me know. I'll see what I can do to get you one. Okay, that being said, I think we're ready to get started on some content here.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Holland. I know Andy already introduced me, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail except to say I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and I really do hope you'll take him up on his offer to respond to questions in real time as much as possible. So do enter comments and questions in the chat box. All are welcome. If you are not already familiar with BoardSource, and I know many of you are, we are a 25-year-old organization, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., but doing our work nationally and in some cases globally. You can see here on this slide many of the things that we do, and I'll just give you two examples or three examples of what this translates into in terms of our actual activities. When we talk about inspiring board service, obviously talking about board recruitment like we are today, and having webinars like this one is a perfect example of that. With respect to the third bullet, cutting edge thinking and resources, obviously a lot of folks know us for our publications. If you are not already familiar with our governance index research, which we conduct every 2 to 3 years, I highly commend that to you, even if you're not a member. The results of that research are free and offer some really interesting and, in my opinion, pithy data, actual hard data about what's going on with the state of governance in the nonprofit sector in the U.S. Finally, we have a convening every year called BoardSource Leadership Forum, BLF for short, and this year it's here in D.C., so we hope you can join us for that. Our objectives for today are really to, as you know, based on the title and the description of this webinar, focus our energies on the value, importance, and steps towards recruiting good board members. And so Andy and I are here to, if you will, kind of put some wraparound tools, tips, best practices, promising practices around our description of this amazing opportunity you have through LinkedIn so that you get the best of both worlds, a really powerful technological tool and also some knowledge about how best to use it. I would be remiss if I didn't also say that while we're completely focused on recruitment during the next 40 minutes or so, it's important to share that and at the risk of stating the obvious, I can't move on from this slide without saying it. It's obviously not enough, right, to get good candidates in the door. We also want to keep good board members. We want to thank them. We want to train them. We want to ask them what their needs are. So this webinar is not focused on all of those other steps, but it's important for us to at least create some framework to share with you that if you are interested in those other pieces beyond recruitment, we obviously have a lot of material on that as well. So moving on. I will be covering Agenda Item 1, Board Recruitment in context, and then I'll kick it over to Andy to handle Items 2 and 3 on the agenda, and then I will come back at Item 4 to talk about communicating your board needs, which really is about how we write the best, tightest, most effective possible posting for LinkedIn so that we can harness the power of this tool to get good board member candidates. So that's a little bit about where we are going. Again, please don't hesitate to ask your questions or chime in with your personal experiences. You do not have to wait until the end to do so. So this slide is just by way of me giving everyone on the line a bit of history and timeline. BoardSource is just so tremendously pleased to be partnering with LinkedIn, and this was an official partnership that we launched at BLF in 2012, so that BoardSource Leadership Forum I just talked about back when we held it in Chicago. And in our experience, it's just been a tremendous partnership, and LinkedIn is just an unbelievably responsive entity in terms of hearing from you what you want. And so the idea of talking about posting your board openings on LinkedIn is something that came directly from you. So I think that's just really kudos to LinkedIn, and we're so honored to be partners with them, to be listening to your needs and helping create tools to fill them. So as I mentioned, my goal in the next segment before I turn it over to Andy is just to give us a little bit of context, because we know there's quite a few of you on the line today, and not everybody has the same needs with respect to board recruitment. And I would venture a guess, without doing a formal survey, that not everybody is coming from the same position in terms of your role in board recruitment. We may have executive directors on the line, or senior staff, or line staff, or board chairs, or new board members, or governance committee members. And so I wanted to just lay a little bit of groundwork before handing it off to Andy, who will really kind of get us into the meat of tools for building your approach to recruitment, just by talking about governance itself. And the point I wanted to share with you all on this slide is that what we really want to do is recruit for the job of governance. A lot of times when I and my, that may sound self-evident, but trust me, it's not. A lot of times when I and my colleagues are in the field consulting, training, counseling with other boards of directors across a variety of sizes and mission areas, folks say, well, you know, I've got this particular candidate who can bring a lot of money to the table, or I've got a particular candidate that can bring some great relationships to the table. And those things, don't get me wrong, are quite important and valuable, certainly to nonprofit reputation and sustainability. But what we ultimately want in terms of recruitment is the full package, that if somebody can bring money to the table, great, but the role of board member is larger than that, and we need folks who understand that their role as a board member is financial and program oversight, setting strategic direction for the organization, i.e. how we live out our mission in the world, and sure, ensuring resources, but again, not only financial, but also reputational and staff talents and capacities. So just a quick reminder as we head into this topic of how we write a good job description, that we're looking for the whole package. Another contextual piece that I think is important to just at least bookmark on our conversation today is that, again, recognizing the variation of who may be on the line for this webinar, your board may be a founding board. Your board may be the initial board of a startup organization, or your board may be a slowly progressing board that is self-perpetuating and evolves over time as term limits create new openings for, if you will, kind of fresh blood and fresh thinking on the board. And I wanted to just bookmark that because it's possible that as your organization grows, your needs and your the way that you characterize your needs for board members grows and evolves as well. So this chart that you're looking at here comes directly from one of our publications, Navigating the Organizational Life Cycle, which we did in partnership with TCC Group. And you just have some nice indicators here. If you're a startup board, yeah, it's highly possible that your board is doing its governance role, but playing a healthy amount of volunteer roles as well in terms of getting the organization off the ground. As you move into adolescence, your board member job descriptions may become more formalized. Andy's going to share an example of one of those with you a little bit later in the webinar. And then mature stages have other indicators and hallmarks to them, and the last two phases as well. Now, I'll just make a quick comment in case some of you are getting worried. This chart does not at all make the assumption that every organization is going to become stagnant or going to become defunct someday. It just simply lays out what those hallmarks are if, in fact, an organization gets to those stages. And so if you were to see the schematic that goes along with this chart, boards and organizations that do a good job of staying vibrant and relevant in today's economy, political situation, demographic changes in the arena, are folks that figure out how to make the best possible capacity building choices during that stagnant phase and renew themselves. So something to think about as you listen to myself and Andy and Allison share some information. Just consider where you're at in your organizational life cycle. All right, and then this again goes back to point 3 of our objectives, where I had shared with you that good board recruitment is moot without strong board investment in other ways as well. And so this is some material from a book that some of you are probably familiar with called The Board Building Cycle. And as you can imagine, there is tremendous intentionality, work to be done, tools to be tapped in every single stage of this cycle. Again, based on the scope of our conversation today, we're not going to go into every one of these steps, but just suffice it to say that if you're starting down this path, keep in mind that you're going to want to have those tools in place, your house in order, if you'll forgive the cliche, so that once you do get those high caliber board candidates in the door, that the experience that they have as governing board members is rewarding and taps into the talents we recruited them for in the first place. Now, I'll make one final note before I turn it over to Andy, because I kind of alluded to this point that I assume there are many different roles on the phone today on the webinar. There may be executive directors and senior staff and board members, and I want to very directly address who it is that should be responsible for recruiting new board members. And we certainly know that there are self-perpetuating boards that really take on the responsibility for identifying new board members, creating a slate of candidates for nomination when those board openings come to the fore. And that's really what I want to talk about in terms of the structures I share with you next, because some of you may be wondering what kind of committees our board should have in order to take on that role of recruitment. Now, there's other situations in which member-based organizations vote in board members from amongst their membership, but I really want to address how nominating committees, governance committees, they go by a variety of names, function, and what we at BoardSource have seen in the field around who it is that's responsible for this work. And really, if you are, I guess I'll just say before I move on to the next slide, if you are in that staff role and finding a good amount of the responsibility of board member recruitment falling to you, it may be worth a conversation with your board chair or with a new board member who seems to be well poised to be a champion for board development, to start thinking through what are the ways that we can identify true ownership on the board itself, of renewing itself and filling those gaps and needs. So let's take a look at the actual structures that your board may have in terms of where those responsibilities lie for recruiting new board members. And there really are at least two, and I said again that this goes by a variety of names, but I'll make this crystal clear on the next slide. There are at least two types of committees that may be responsible for identifying new board members. One is a nominating committee that is typically a time-limited ad hoc committee that is responsible for some portion of the year to create a slate of board candidates. The other is a governance committee, which may have that nomination role within its charge or within its committee charter, but it typically has a lot of other responsibilities as well, and they can be bundled in different ways. but a year-long, year-round standing committee that, in addition to identifying board members, actually does, if you will, the care and feeding of the board, that helps lead the charge for a self-assessment of the board members' own governance practices. How well are we doing in our governance roles? Leads the charge for meeting evaluations, board education, things of that nature. Now, what you're looking at here is a chart that actually outlines some of that governance index data that I had alluded to earlier. And so this is the data from 2012, our most recently completed governance index, and just shows what the most common committees are. And we asked it, as you can see, in a combined way around governance and nominating committees. But in that case, 38% of our respondents, and that's from among our membership, but also a randomly selected sample, said that they do have either a governance committee or a nominating committee or a combination of both. Just to put this data in perspective, we also know that boards have a average number of 5.5 committees, and that while this shows 38% for a governance/nominating committee, kind of that combined imperative, it fell off the chart there because we were looking at the top 4 most common, but in terms of a standalone nominating committee, that response was 29%, in case you were wondering. So here you see the side-by-side that I actually kind of verbally talked through earlier in terms of what's the difference between a nominating and a governance committee. And again, I've seen when I've worked with boards in the field and looked at different committee charters, various combinations of the ways that these committees might be structured. And again, some have a combined governance and nominating committee. But I think the real takeaway here is if you haven't already had some conversations or thought as a board about what kind of committee you have now, what kind of committee you need for the recruitment of board members, and how clear and well documented is it in terms of what that committee's job is, then now would be a good time for those conversations, especially if you're feeling alone today, like I'm the only one on this webinar looking for some good advice and I don't know who else is supposed to lead the charge with me. So some things to ponder as you think about how to implement this information. And now I'll turn it over to Andy to take it from here.
No problem. So what do you think, Jennifer? Are we going to kill our nominating committee? I mean, are we trying to evolve this? Or do you think a nominating committee serves a purpose on a board, or all boards should move that nominating committee and go to a strictly governance committee system?
I think the nomination function needs to happen regardless. Obviously, somebody needs to be paying attention, keeping their eye on the ball in terms of where we're getting new exceptional board candidates from. But one of the things we see anecdotally, it hasn't necessarily borne out in the governance index data yet, is that there's an increase in the use of governance committees. Folks are really feeling as though the board is ready to step up and take a larger role in their own, again, quote unquote, care and feeding, and that in order to perform well, there do need to be inputs throughout the year in terms of overall board performance, because frankly, boards function as a team, and that's where the legal responsibility lies. So without some attention to how we function as a group, it's hard to make those strides in good governance.
That's right. And so now that we know who's kind of in charge of finding the right people, we need to talk about how to do that, right? And the number one thing is thinking strategically. I think one of the main problems we see with boards all over the country, boards that are operating in this functional stage or compliant stage, as we call them, which is better than dysfunctional, but they're using kind of, at worst, a warm body thought process where, you know, they've got people who are showing up to meetings and that's good enough, right? And then the second, and so that's the worst problem. The next worst, the next thing that's really bad for a board that we see it all the time is this, I know somebody who's great. You know, my boss or my colleague at work is you know, they're really smart and they've got access to resources, and so they're going to be a great fit on our board, which is often the case. But many times it's not the case, because what happens is you are fishing from the same pond. You know, you have access to resources, but it might be the same resources that other folks on your board are sitting on. So sometimes, you know, you need to look at those people and figure out exactly what role they're going to fill on your board, right? So what you're really starting to do is look at identifying the gaps, looking at and seeing where are we going into the future and what do we need. I'm always telling boards that you shouldn't be looking at just what you need today, although that is obviously important, but go back to that strategic plan and say, where did we plan to be 3 to 5 years from now? Where do we want to be when this board member rolls, when his term is up or when his second term is up? And finding out, looking at those needs and meeting, you know, finding the gaps that are there and looking to fill those needs. So one great way to look at your board, and we're not going to talk about this in detail, but I'm more than happy to answer questions on it, is to do a board self-assessment. And a board self-assessment can be done through a variety of means. BoardSource has one, but other organizations have them as well. And it's really going back and assessing your board's performance, evaluating. You need to be evaluating programs, evaluating your chief executive, but never forgetting to evaluate your board and say, okay, what skills do we have now? Where are we, you know, what do we do well? What do we not do well? And then finding the people who can meet those needs. But that's not exactly the same. So once you find out what you need, then developing that board matrix to find out what you have and where you can go in the future. And I'm going to talk about this a lot more here, but the most important thing here is to be really specific and not just give this kind of high level, this is kind of what we need, or to look at our sample here and go, oh, well, I can just copy this. Now, you really need to think about what your organization needs. Are you thinking about maybe moving beyond your current office space? What kind of expertise would that need on your board? What kind of advisory committees or task forces would people be able to fill out and make good fits on their board? Just a note, when you're considering board building, when you're talking about board building, make sure that you're going back and looking at your bylaws to see what your bylaws say is allowable for your board size, term limits, that sort of thing. Sadly, we see a lot of boards who aren't paying attention to their own bylaws, and these are binding documents that you have to be following, legally speaking. But I was on a phone call not too long ago with an executive director who said that they haven't met quorum in 6 months, but they're still taking votes. And I kind of stopped him and I asked, well, how are you taking votes? Well, he said, these are the people who are showing up. We got to make decisions. No, that's not the way it happens. So make sure that you're looking at your bylaws and you're saying, you're not having too many members, you don't have too few members, your people are rotating at their proper terms. But once you've done that, go and use this tool, a board matrix, that can lay out exactly what it is your current members have, where there might be gaps missing, and what you need for prospective members moving into the future. I really do truly believe that a successful board is a diverse board. And we're not just talking about diversity of gender, diversity of race, that sort of thing, diversity of age, but we're also talking about diversity of background, diversity of expertise, diversity of networks, to make sure that you're getting the most out of every single one of your board members. We know, and I'm going to flip to another page here so you can see more of the board matrix, but we know that boards who are racially diverse or ethnically diverse or generationally diverse are in better position to remain relevant and effective and grounded when they reflect the needs of the community that they serve. We also know from a diversity standpoint that grant makers are increasingly focused on diversity when they make grants to organizations. The research that we have done so far, and there's not a ton of it out there, but we are starting to get these glimmers of knowledge that tell us that diverse organizations are more likely to attract diverse donors, and that's because obviously people give where they feel welcomed. So one more thing on this matrix, and we're going to move on, but one easy trap to fall into is you don't want to create those token positions, right? Nobody wants to feel that they should be on the board just to be able to, because they checked a box. You need to be taking everyone's skills, abilities, and perspectives into consideration when adding any board members. The matrix that we have here that you're looking at is only here to let you know what you're missing. Remember, no one ever can represent an entire subsection of the population, and obviously when we talk about that, every board member should be treated with respect and expect the same from everyone. Our governance index shows us that we haven't made a lot of progress in diversity on boards over the last 25 years or so, and some of the research tells us that there's a lot of people from diverse backgrounds that are sitting on boards, but they're not staying on boards, and that's when we get to this inclusivity piece, right? We're meeting the diversity piece with numbers, but we're not doing our part to ensure inclusivity. Okay, so let's talk about what your board actually needs. And good board members typically possess two things: an ability to listen. Well, they need more than just two things, but they have this ability to listen. As you can see on the screen, I won't read through there for you, but to analyze, think clearly. Good board members need to be asking good questions and expecting good answers. I think that second part is always the most important. If you're not expecting good answers, then you're only doing half the job. That means asking follow-up questions, making sure that your board members are attentive and understanding what information's been given to them. Like we show here, board members need to be able to, when they get financial documents, that sort of thing, they need to, if they don't understand, they need to be able to ask questions and analyze. They also need to be willing to talk about the organization, the work it's doing out in the field. They need to be good ambassadors for the organization. This is often a problem when we have folks who sit on 2 or 3 boards of similar that are similar in nature, and then there becomes a conflict of what board is more important, what board are they really being an ambassador for. So board members need to be able to be involved and be willing to be an ambassador for the organization and the community. To kind of put this in, to codify this, we need to start really talking about board member expectations. And board member expectations need to be set up front. And what we have here on the screen is a copy of a board member agreement. And I know that font is extremely small and you probably can't read it. I know that I can't read it from across the room over here. But basically what it says is it lays out before a board member ever even joins the board, here's what we expect of you. And if you're not able to fulfill these expectations, then we may need to wait until you're a better fit for this organization. A board can't be afraid to tell a prospective member no if they don't feel like they can fulfill the obligations. And the reverse is a prospective board member should not be afraid to tell the board no. There needs to be a mutual understanding that there are certain rules and obligations that they have to fulfill if they want to be a high-performing board member. Every good board member agreement should really set the specific expectations for board service. We see most of the time, and I recommend having expectations for fundraising, personal giving, how they'll be active in committees or active in meetings, what they're setting expectations for attendance, and promises such as conflict of interest or confidentiality issues, make sure that we're disclosing those or not disclosing the confidential issues. So those kind of things should be included in the board member agreement. Also, on the flip side, we should be making certain promises to board members, letting them know how we'll keep them informed, letting them know how they're protected under our various insurance policies, that sort of thing, letting them know what we're able to give them as a board member for our organization. So I think that that is really just the most important aspect of being a good board member is being prepared and having the knowledge you need up front.
Great point, Andy. And I think what I would segue from this slide to the next on, because I'm about to talk about communicating your individual board member needs, i.e. writing your posting, is that really what we're talking about here is what are the things that you're going to expect of every board member? I love that Andy said, let's codify this. Have we had, as a full board, concrete conversations and gotten to the point of being able to put it in writing what we expect of every board member? We need to understand that basic, and basic is probably the wrong word here, that foundational set of expectations that we expect of every board member before we get to the point of creating a customized posting for specific skill sets. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is we want to avoid that challenge or trap of, again, having a lopsided board. If we're out of compliance with our bylaws because some board members feel like they have the right to skip as many meetings as they want, and the chair is not necessarily reining that behavior in or expecting accountability there, then we have a problem. It's going to be very hard to recruit to that kind of board. So moving from our foundational expectations of all board members to then thinking about what are the specific responsibilities that you're looking for in terms of putting your own posting up on LinkedIn is, I think, just a fundamental hinge point here, or access point in the types of conversations we're encouraging you to have as a board. The only thing I'll do in addition, because I think the next steps here, or the step-by-step process here, is pretty straightforward, is just share an anecdote from the field that if you have not already come to some conclusions about those general expectations, I would encourage you not to be afraid to ask your board in large group configurations, small group configurations, individual focus groups, one-on-one conversations, how board members feel about what those basic responsibilities should be. I worked with the board in the South that was a foundation, so they were a giving entity, and they had traditionally had very, very wealthy individuals on the board who could help invest in all of the giving and that the foundation monitored. And then at some point they made a bit of a right turn or a left turn, whichever you'd like to say, and they did put that thought in that Andy was just advocating to think about what are our giving policies. And they said, well, we don't necessarily need to have everybody give this set amount. We want folks to be able to give according to their means and give in a way that's personally significant. But the folks that came on board after that policy change actually were confused about why they were recruited, because it was very transparently clear that they were not in the same income bracket as the majority of the board, and that policy change wasn't discussed as a full board and documented as a full board. So I say that by way of saying if you're in the process of developing those foundational expectations and creating that inclusive environment, I think transparency, openness, and a willingness to experiment are really helpful, because the whole board needs to be on board to make such a change. So once you've done these three things we've just been advocating for, understood who's responsible for recruitment, completed a board matrix or similar type of evaluation about what your board needs actually are, and have a concrete idea of your general board responsibilities, we'd encourage you to go ahead and begin putting your posting together. So as you draft different iterations of your posting, just some checkpoint questions for you. And I should share here that I know there's a decent amount of text on this slide. We will be sending these slides and some complementary information and supplementary information out after the webinar. So you do not need to feel like this is your only shot at seeing this information. But think about how many descriptions do you need? Whose review will the final posting require? If it's a staff member putting together the draft or the governance committee putting together the draft, when will we know we are done? Who needs to sign off before we feel comfortable that these are the positions that we know we want to recruit for? And then again, as Andy said, short-term and long-term needs. And then the whole right-hand column again falls into that bucket of really thinking about, okay, once we get a really strong position description up online, are we prepared to go to the next step, do some of the interviewing, do some of the orientation for those successful candidates once they've been nominated and voted in. So let's not rush the process so much that we don't have those next steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 lined up for when we get good candidates in the door. And then finally, this is a snapshot of what you'll actually be looking at after you have drafted, or perhaps while you are drafting your position description. And there's some really good specific, I will call them to-dos or tips for how to best fill this out. And that's going to come to you along with the slide deck. There are some key words that you need to use in the various boxes so that LinkedIn can create the right search filters and help direct the best possible candidates to you. And I'll just give you some examples here. In the job title box, you want to come up with a job title that begins with the word volunteer. That's the only kind of mandate. And then it might be something along the lines of volunteer board member parentheses finance, or volunteer board member parentheses human resources. And this is where we get to the kind of specific skill sets that you're going to want to be recruiting for on your board. But do, as you craft your job title, include the word volunteer. Similarly, in the job description, you want to, perhaps at the end, just put that tag LinkedIn for good volunteering on it, again, so that the power of the networking that's going on through the LinkedIn software can actually be unlocked. Now, I guess what I'll share here, too, is simply that, you know, you've done everything that Andy and I have shared so far. As Andy said, you've gone back to your bylaws. You know exactly how many slots you can recruit for. Even if you only have 1 or 2 positions, you can put multiple postings together. When BoardSource was recently recruiting for some open positions, we actually put together 4 different profiles in different categories because there were just a number of skill sets we were hoping to look for. So we had a specific profile for a corporate leader, a specific profile for a social change advocate, a specific profile for a networked nonprofit leader. So those are folks who are at the helm of or in leadership positions with federated national nonprofits, and then finally recognized governance experts or academics. And so that's how we thought through where we thought our needs really were. So doing that writing, and then the last thing we want to double check, and then I'll turn it back over to Andy for an actual example of how this has worked out for a specific nonprofit organization, is maybe we can write that everyone's kind of, if you've been on the interviewing side of the job recruitment table, we know that it's highly possible to have things look good on paper that don't kind of pan out in real life. And so what we don't want to do here is have the perfect resume but not be the perfect candidate. And on the flip side of that, we don't want to have the perfect board member job description but not be living our values around what kind of board we want to be. So these are some valuable questions, I think, that especially in small communities where there are 3 or 4 just, if you will, rock stars in the community that are consistently being asked to be on boards, it's worth thinking through how do our board members get introduced to our organization? What's our organization's reputation? Do they feel thanked? If we put in all this hard work to be thoughtful about what skills we need, are folks actually able to plug those skills in once they're serving, or do they feel as though they're sitting through multiple meetings and they're not engaged? So really important to ask yourself, not just does our description put together appeal, but are we the board of choice when folks are in their actual board service? And so with that, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Yeah, so we've kind of heard about what you need to be looking for, who is responsible for this process, the governance committee, how to identify needs and look at the gaps that you need to fill, and now Jennifer has talked us through being able to write a great position. So we just want to talk about this organization, One Warm Coat. They're a national 501c3 nonprofit, and when Allison and I were putting together this webinar initially, we started talking about organizations who have used the tool and how it has worked out for them, and we got this great anecdote from Sherry at One Warm Coat who told us that they had been looking for a millennial board member. They wanted to expand their diversity, but weren't sure really how to go about that. Used the tool, and she just wrote us and said basically it's kind of crazy how they've got a 26-year-old board member now who's got a BS, a Bachelor of Science, 2 master's degrees, working on his 3rd, wanted to sit on a board of directors. And when they looked at his background and his incredible background in finance and accounting, he does that for a major defense contractor for a living, and saw how he wanted to have a sense of giving back to his own community, they really thought maybe this is the person. Well, after a few months of having him on their board, he now leads the audit committee, and because they meet nationally, or because they're a national board and they meet through teleconferencing, he feels like his time and talents are being used really efficiently to make an impact, not just in his own community now, but across the country. And you know, we talked about that need to identify gaps, to diversify your board, but there's also people out there who unexpectedly are going to make, you know, really incredible contributions to your organization if you just are able to find them, open up your networks, and by doing that, really using this LinkedIn and this tool to find the people, the right people who are out there to fill those open spaces and those needs that are on your board. So we thought that this was a great story and really inspiring for a great outcome of using this tool and what could be if you can use the tool effectively. So that being said, what I want to do now is turn it over to Allison for just a minute to talk about how to establish your nonprofit's company page.
All right, thanks, Andy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the company page just because it fits into the job posting for a board member, because if you think about your identity on LinkedIn, for an individual, it's all based around your profile, and for an organization, it's really all based around your company page. And just a quick point of clarification, company page is really just a name for the tool. All organizations have company pages, including nonprofits, so don't let the word company throw you off there. And when thinking about your company page, first the thing to do is think about how you want your brand to be established on LinkedIn. How do you want members on LinkedIn to think about your company page, think about your organization? And you can start by adding your mission statement, talking about your programs, adding your logo, describing your nonprofit. And then also encourage your board members and your volunteers and your supporters and your staff to all follow your company page. And then use that really as this microphone for announcements. Tell your community through your company page what it is that you're doing right now. And you can also tell your community there that you are recruiting board members. And the reason that the company page is such an important part of a board posting is that when you write your job description for a board member and you put the company name in there, that actually links to your company page. So when candidates are looking at your job description, they will click over to see your company page to learn more about the organization and see if it appears to be a good fit for them. So it's important to build that company page before making those job descriptions. And then this image here is kind of what you see after you finish writing your job description. So when you're in the BoardSource Board Recruitment Center and you click through for your free LinkedIn job posting, you will see this gray bar across the top that says that it's 100% off. And you will still have to put in your credit card information. Everything on LinkedIn is verified by credit card because it's usually a paid product. But when you see that $0 at the bottom, you know that you will not be charged for this. So don't post a job posting if it says anything other than $0 at the bottom for a board member, because your board postings should be free because of your BoardSource membership. So Andy's going to talk through how this appears through the Board Recruitment Center, and that's how you're going to get to this free job posting. Thanks.
Right. So when you go to our website now, and we're really, really excited about it. We have an entire new Board Recruitment Center, and it is your link. When you click on there, you will find a link to take you directly through to the LinkedIn posting area, so you can get your free posting access there. You do have to be a BoardSource member, but you do not have to be a BoardSource member to access the Recruitment Center, and I would encourage you to do that if you're a member or if you're not, because there's a lot of free white papers, tools there to learn more about recruitment, and then learn what you would need to really get a posting ready to go over to the LinkedIn site and get that posting up. So if you go to our homepage, on the very right-hand side, you now see a new tab that we just have up as of this week that says Leadership Initiatives, and you click on that right-hand side, and when you do that, you'll see 3 boxes below: the Board Advocacy Campaign, our Board Recruitment Center, and the Nonprofit Governance Index, which Jennifer talked about earlier. That middle one is where you want to go. It has resources for addressing the Board Recruitment Challenge, It helps you find new board members and locate service opportunities for yourself. So it's a really, really great brand new tool that we're really excited about. And I do just also want to say before we get off today, if you have a question, we might be able to take a couple very quickly. Right after this, we talked a lot about bylaws today. Right after this, as soon as I'm finished, we're starting another webinar at 2 o'clock, a 101 webinar free to all of our members entirely on bylaws. And we might hit on recruitment a little bit in that webinar as well, so we would love to see you over there. Now, if we've got any questions, that would be great. So I will give it just a second and see if we do. Okay. I'm going to put this, I'm going to record, or this session has been recorded. If you would like a copy, feel free to email me at andy.davis@boardsource.org or send any questions that you have about recruitment, about the LinkedIn tool, about anything that you want to know about board governance. You can send those questions to me at andy.davis@boardsource.org. And so I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up and say, Allison, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I just wanted to pipe in with my email address as well. So if any of you have questions specifically about using LinkedIn for your board recruitment, you could feel free to reach out to me with those. My email address is adorsey, A-D-O-R-S-E-Y, @linkedin.com. So feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.